Welcome to today's FHA webinar on maximizing the revenue. With you today, you've got myself, Jeff Neiman, the CEO of Meduit, and Doug Gardner, our Vice President of Client Engagement. And I'll share a little bit about my background and then let Doug do the same here. I've spent about the first 10 years of my career or so working on the provider side of the fence, managing portions of the revenue cycle for HCA early on and the entire revenue cycle for Tenet later. I flipped over in the last 10 years or so of my career to the vendor side of the fence. I was one of the founding executives of Conifer, went on from there to be the chief operating officer of Symetrics, which eventually became Navigant Symetrics when we sold the company, and joined Meduit about 2 years ago. But all of my career has been in revenue cycle focused on driving improvement either for my own revenue cycle or as a third-party vendor in partnership with my existing customers who are trying to drive improvement in their revenue cycle. Doug, I'll turn it to you and let you share your background.
Thanks, Jeff. My career spans 30 years, all in operations management. I spent a significant amount of time earlier in my career in the banking industry at Citibank. There I learned a lot about operations management and how to develop efficient processes. I also learned the value of incorporating technology to enhance those processes. I spent the next 16 years at 3 different health systems in the Midwest, learning revenue cycle operations while driving enhanced process through technology. Coming from the banking industry into healthcare helped me to look at hospital operational challenges differently. I've been with Meduit for about 7 months now, bringing a hospital operations and technology focus to the relationship management team.
All right, so today we're going to share with you a little bit of information about Meduit and who we are as a company, followed by some recommendations that we think are certainly best practices in the revenue cycle and areas where everyone really should be concentrated and focused on in normal environments and also even in the post-COVID environment as we emerge here. So we'll start with who is Meduit. Meduit is one of the 10 largest revenue cycle companies in the United States. You see here on this slide a map of our existing locations. We've got 9 different offices and customers spread out across the country in about 46 different potential locations. We serve 850 hospitals and large physician practices today. We support in total about 60,000 physicians. Some of those are independent, some of those are associated with a health system. We have over 1,000 employees spread out across those 9 locations that you saw earlier. We are 100% focused on healthcare revenue cycle. Size-wise, just to give you a sense of that, we managed about $25 billion in receivables last year in 2019 and continue to grow that number every year. One of the things we're most proud of is just how we engage with our customers. So without getting into a lengthy discussion of this, we have a Net Promoter Score of 68. If you're not familiar with Net Promoter Scores, they range from -100 to +100. So an average score would be a 0. Just to give you a sense of a 68, that's on par with organizations like Ritz-Carlton, Apple Computer, Costco, organizations that have a high level of customer engagement and satisfaction, and that has been and will continue to be a major focus of us as a company. Part of that is a result of our partnership approach. So we are not positioning as a company to come in and take over the revenue cycle, but rather are focused on determining how we can partner to drive better overall outcomes at a lower cost structure with our customers. And that's typically accomplished through a combination of handoffs where our customers do what they excel at. We take on pieces where maybe they don't have size, scale, or technology, and we can make them better in specific targeted areas. And through that partnership overall, deliver better results, better patient satisfaction, and just a higher overall outcome of the revenue cycle performance for their organization. The next thing you'll see here is our various solutions. So as you can see, we've got solutions all the way from scheduling back through charged off patient receivables and bad debt collections. The light shaded blue boxes are all areas where we have a core competency, or the circles rather. The orange boxes that are kind of offshoots here are specific solutions that we have. I'll share that with no one customer do we do everything, meaning we don't do end-to-end turn over the keys, full rev cycle outsourcing. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we partner in specific areas and come in and help where we can truly provide some expertise and excellence in lift and performance. So many of our customers buy multiple solutions from us here. Nobody has bought every single solution that we have to offer because it just doesn't make sense, and that's not the right approach for them or for us. All right, so jumping into what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk a little bit about the post-COVID healthcare environment and what that looks like. We're going to talk about some strategies to make sure that you're maximizing your cash, which is more important than ever on the stressed healthcare systems across the United States trying to emerge from this focus on COVID. And a piece of that as well, we'll be talking about how we reduce the risk of accounts falling into bad debt. So learning objectives for today. We hope that you'll gain an understanding of the changing RCM environment, why providers are leaving portions of unresolved accounts untouched or on the table, best practices for collecting patient payments upon registration, and for securing insurance payment at time of registration so that you get paid for the services that you're going to provide. We're going to provide some tips for reducing claim denials. We're going to talk about when to continue to pursue an unpaid or an underpaid account and when to write them off to bad debt. We're going to talk about understanding how patient payment plans work. And finally, we'll spend some time on how payment prediction tools can help providers maximize their cash flow. So we're going to start out here with just the post-COVID landscape. Obviously, COVID-19 has changed how healthcare organizations function to a broad degree. I think in most cases, we are not going to see providers go back to exactly the way they were doing things before COVID. We're seeing announcements of significant cost reductions, staff reductions, and as a result of that, and just the financial stress that's been placed on the system across the country, facilities are going to need to create new ways of doing business going forward that are going to leverage efficiencies and working smarter, so to speak, as opposed to harder when it comes to how they manage the revenue cycle from this point on. I think there's a lot that's scary out there that's unknown, obviously. Could there be a second wave? How do we bill for things that are new and different, right? People are having to get up to speed on that quickly, but there's a lot of unknown and a lot of changes. But the one kind of consistent thing that we're hearing and seeing is that we've got to become more efficient and find cheaper ways to drive revenue into the business than what we've historically done. So a couple of things that are changing and a couple other themes that we're hearing here are remote workforces, right? So many people either sent employees home. We saw a high number of customers just shift people to home. We did the same thing in Meduit with well over 50% of our staff starting to work from home. Figuring out now how to re-engage and bring some of those folks back. And in many cases, what we're seeing is decisions to try to keep folks working from home instead of bringing them back into the office. So how do we move to a remote work environment? How do we measure and maintain productivity in those environments? There's a lot of challenges for organizations to figure out there. And in many cases, there have been net headcount reductions. So how do you get the same amount of work done when it comes back here that you did before with fewer people? We're also hearing, a theme of, because of that tightness of resources, because of the focus on improved efficiencies and reduced cost structures, an interest in outsourcing to a higher degree than maybe what was there previously. Specifically, I've had some conversations with CFOs and VPs of revenue cycle who are talking about contingency-based contracts and the importance of those, which allow them to scale up or down quickly and make, as the revenue dries up, the cost challenges associated with that the problem of your vendor partner, as opposed to having to manage through that as a provider. Artificial intelligence is another thing that everybody's talking about. Certainly a big way to drive efficiency and cost savings, to reduce the reliance on physical assets and people to do the work. We'll be sharing more with you about kind of how we're leading the industry through that later on in the webinar. The thing I focus on here is that you can't wait for artificial intelligence. You have to engage quickly and be an early mover. Artificial intelligence is never going to be a plug and play type of solution. It's something that it learns over time. That's the definition of artificial intelligence. It starts, the analogy I give people is it's like starting in kindergarten and going all the way through years and years of school up to graduating from university, right? But to get there, you have to go through a lot of steps in between. AI is never going to be at a university level the day that you plug it in. So you always have to get started, and 6 to 12 months down the road is when you really start to build and gain momentum and efficiencies. All of this kind of comes down to one thing, which is there is a major platform for change across the healthcare industry right now. And we have got to take advantage of that platform for change, all of us, right? Doing business the way that we've always done it just isn't going to be successful and isn't going to be accepted moving forward. So just like organizations are driving significant change in the delivery of clinical services, right? We're seeing acceptance of telehealth for the first time ever really on a broad scale. We're seeing changes in how healthcare is delivered inside the hospital and parking lots, all kinds of cases. We've got to adapt and make changes in the revenue cycle as well. So how can Medua help? From the beginning of a patient's account all the way through resolving aged accounts, we have many solutions. And Doug and I today are going to share just from our experience, both with solutions that we provide, as well as past experience even prior to Medua, where we think some of the hot areas are today in the revenue cycle where you just have to focus to be successful. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Doug to talk about this first piece with pre-service solutions.
Healthcare organizations are increasingly challenged with the necessary administrative tasks, including patient-friendly scheduling, pre-authorization services, and early notification to the payer. These functions are time-consuming and require hands-on communication, but are necessary to expedite efficient access to care and to stay in front of compliance and regulatory oversight. These tasks should include insurance verification, patient copay education, and authorization. The services should be patient-friendly and compliance-based. They should be technology-enabled in order to provide seamless communication between the payers and the provider, utilizing text, voice, web chat, and deliver a quality monitoring component and performance reporting to ensure high-quality outcomes. Be sure you're pre-registering 98% of the patients more than 48 hours before their scheduled event. And you should make at least one phone call attempt, hopefully more, to contact that patient. During pre-authorization, determine what services need to be authorized and have a process in place to track and ensure authorization is obtained. It's also important to have a dedicated resource monitoring the payer communications to ensure new services that are added to the pre-authorization requirement are built into the pre-auth process. We see a lot of denials where payers will change requirements, and the first time that a provider notices those changes is when they start to see some of the denials. Pre-registration is an ideal time to confirm coverage and benefits while communicating potential financial responsibility to the patient in the early stage. It's really key to set that stage for the patient, even if you can't communicate or collect at that time. They at least understand that there's going to be an expectation that there is some type of a payment when they present for their services. Regarding registration, the increasing number of uninsured patients, eligibility determination complexities and Medicaid billing challenges are adversely impact the ability of healthcare providers to receive appropriate reimbursement services. It's really key, as everyone understands, to get that registration right the first time. Registration is an ideal time to determine Medicaid eligibility for the uninsured patients to ensure that the provider receives the reimbursement for the services. If you aren't screening for all inpatient and high dollar outpatients with your current staff or vendor, you should be doing that. If the patient isn't eligible for Medicaid, a financial assistance application should be provided as a last resort or a safety net. It's important that the process be technology enabled to provide a seamless communication between patients and the provider via text, voice, or maybe even web chat. The technology aspects improve the patient experience and can be a differentiator in the provider's market. Best practice health systems are already using this technology-enabled solution. High deductible health plans are becoming more the norm, as many of you know, but many health systems have been slow to adapt to this change. As patients present their insurance, a high deductible health plan may look just like regular insurance. That is, until you adjudicate the claim and find out that the patient has not satisfied any of their deductible and the entire service is out of pocket. In essence, the patients with high deductible health plans are self-pay patients. Another thing to review is hospital reserve models to make sure that they accommodate this new type of plan. Without the differentiation, hospitals are potentially under-reserving this growing class of patient. Some of the tips that we offer: high-performing hospitals identify high deductible health plans at pre-registration and segment for a separate pre-service collection strategy. Many real-time eligibility systems now return out-of-pocket information for the patients, so the hospitals can determine how much of the service will truly be out-of-pocket. We see a lot of self-pay strategies can then be applied as needed. In addition, again, make sure you analyze the impact of the high deductible health plans on your reserve modeling.
Yeah, Doug, I think, you know, those are some great tips. I'm amazed still how when you see high deductible plans, health systems seem to treat those as insurance and just don't seem to be kind of understanding that these are really more uninsured patients in many ways. I mean, in our own case, hey, as an employer, we have a high deductible plan. And I sort of laugh because when my wife goes to use it, she tells me all the time, do we even have insurance? They just told me I owed the full amount, right? Which is very true on the front end of these. And you really have to think strategically different as an organization and start treating these more as at least in the early stage when they haven't met their deductible yet, as a uninsured account and not as an insured account in many cases. Next thing I'm going to cover here is just working your AR every 30 days. We found this is one of the key tips to success in the revenue cycle. And although it sounds simple, I mean, this is like kind of Rev Cycle 101, and I know we all know this. I think if we're all honest, we'd have to say that there are numbers, just a number of times in our career and experience where this hasn't happened, and we know it hasn't happened, right? And usually it's because of staffing shortfalls and budget constraints, and you know, we're making a choice that with limited resources, we just don't have enough productivity, so to speak, out of our limited resources to work every account every 30 days. And so what we're doing is making intelligent decisions to determine what we're going to work and what we're not going to work. So oftentimes we're working our high balance accounts, or we're working our fresh AR and not our really old aged AR, because we know that that's left less collectible, right? But ultimately, whatever it is that we're choosing not to work, whether it's intentional or unintentional, it's aging out. And as it ages out, again, Rev Cycle 101, we all understand that it's going to become less collectible over time. And eventually we're going to have to write it off to bad debt. So one of the simplest pieces of advice that we have for providers is analyze your AR and track, if you have the ability to do so in your system, what you're working every 30 days and what you're not. Because what you're working every 30 days is great. That clearly indicates you've got the staff to handle that. But if there's a pocket of AR you're not working, you want to be deliberate about that. And I would suggest engage some sort of outside revenue cycle team to assist you in recovering those accounts before they age out and get lost and get written off to bad debt. Although that costs more money to engage somebody outside the organization to collect those accounts, what we will find, and we'll share a little case study here in a minute, is that the overall net financial reward is far more than the cost of engaging a third party to do that for you. In addition, I would say if you are limited on resources, using payer scoring and segmentation can really help you target your limited resources to make sure that you are hitting the pockets of your AR that are going to drive the most cash for you. So the negative impact of unworked AR is minimized within your organization. So I just want to touch quickly on collectability of AR. I think this will probably resonate with everybody, but we published this in a white paper a while back. It's simply the concept that as accounts age, they're going to become less and less collectible. But I think, what's shocking sometimes is we all kind of recognize this, but if we sat down and really did the math, you would see sort of the ranges that you see on this page. So an account that at day 0 to 30, when we first bill it and follow up with it, we probably have the opportunity to generate 95 to 100 cents on the dollar of what our expected reimbursement is. That quickly drops to almost half after you get to the 91 to 180 day time range. So after 6 months, my ability to generate $1 is half of what it was the day that I billed the claim. And it quickly deteriorates after that point to, as you get north of 6 months or north of a year, your chance of generating any sort of cash and realizing that revenue is pretty minimal. So again, something I think we all know, but just the magnitude of the risk of having that account age out, particularly past 90 days, becomes extensive, yet it's something that we all do in our revenue cycles every day. So when you outsource, right, back to the case study I mentioned earlier, this particular case study was a mid-sized regional hospital who was undersourced in their business office just due to a lack of qualified employees in their local marketplace. Again, they were kind of a somewhat rural hospital, and so finding trained people who could come in and work their AR was a real challenge for them. They engaged us to help figure out what they should keep in-house versus what they should outsource to us. And so basically what we discovered is we just came in and did the analysis. I said, what are you touching every 30 days and what are you not? And what it appeared is that once an account hit 120 days, they weren't working it anymore. So their focus was on fresh AR and much less so as the account started to age out at all, were they focused on it. The study that we did said that the staff was only working 2% of their AR over 120 on a monthly basis. Now, they were still generating about 15% of their collections on AR over 120. So a little disproportionate, meaning they were probably working the high dollar accounts over 120, which was generating, the 15% versus the 2% that they were actually working. But it was equating essentially for this hospital to about $300,000 a month in collections that they were generating on their over 120 AR. So our recommendation here to them was, why don't you outsource a day 120? Let's put an outsource team on this and figure out what kind of value can be created and see if, the return is worth the investment and the cost that you're making. So what we saw here in the case study is that within the first 30 days of the project startup, Meadow was staffed to the point where we were able to work 53% of the accounts that were out there over 120. The hospital staff, again, if you go back to the prior slide for a second, would have only been able to work 2% of the accounts in that same time frame, right? So having a dedicated focus on that made a big difference in the volume of accounts that got worked. Within 60 days, so another 30 days after the first 30 days, right? So 60 days of the engagement of the project, 79% of the 53% of the accounts that got worked in the first 30 days got resolved. Now, resolution could mean that they generated, a cash payment from the payer. It could be that the payer paid correctly and the adjustment just needed to get posted and the account pushed to patient collections, for example, for the remaining portion, or it could be a full write-off, right? It could be any of those things. But again, just working the accounts, 79% of the accounts that got worked got resolved within 30 days. So in total, we were able just in the first 60 days of this project to resolve 42% of the accounts that were sitting out there over 120 the day that we started. Collections increased by 5 times. So we took the collections from $300,000 a month up to $1.5 million a month. And that trend has continued. It did continue after the project. So we're getting the ongoing new fresh accounts that rolled over 120, and we're consistently generating that $1.5 million a month. So you look at that and you think, okay, they're generating 300,000 before, we're now at 1.5 million. The fee that is being charged on this business is pretty small in comparison to what's left. And so the net return to this hospital has been over $1 million a month in additional cash flow or reduced bad debt as a result of this, right? Now, some people certainly, I think, would perhaps argue that, hey, maybe they would have gotten this anyway. The result is that they didn't have the resources to work this inventory and they weren't getting it. So now that they've changed the process, we're getting the money. But that definitely was not the case prior to engaging with a partner to help solve this problem, and it's created significant financial gain for the facility. All right, I'm going to turn it back to Doug to take us through the next couple sections.
Yeah, anybody who lives in the rev cycle world recognizes that denials are a normal part of our operational challenges. According to a recent report produced by the advisory board, approximately 90% of denials are preventable and avoidable, but they are still a major pain point. The average claim denial rate across the healthcare industry is between 5 and 10%, according to the American Academy of Family Physicians report. Some of the top reasons for claim denials include eligibility and incorrect insurance, demographic errors, coding errors, and medical necessity. In order to maximize claim reimbursement revenue, providers should target a claim denial rate of approximately 5% or less. To reduce denials, take a hard look at your denial patterns and focus on the issues that generate the highest dollar value of the denials. A really key piece of this is to track the denials and then apply analytics to determine top reasons and top payers for driving the denials. And then the denials by service, by department, by physician, etc. The key in managing all denials is really the analytics behind it. And these recommendations may seem obvious, but there's a lot of health systems that are just not tracking and trending this information today. Take 2 to 3 top issues each month and take action to improve. Do it one issue at a time and you take a proactive approach, you can drive pretty significant improvement over a year's time. From a patient AR perspective, hospitals should be using some type of scoring and segmentation methodology to determine which accounts can pay and should be worked versus populations of low potential payment where statements should be sent, but limited or no additional resources applied. Some patients may require a patient payment plan that extends beyond a hospital's in-house payment parameters. Some of the best practice solutions we've seen is considering using a financial partner that pairs patients with financial institutions that provide 0 to low interest loans. Patients are then empowered to work their medical bills into their budget, and the patient sets up the monthly payment plan that fits their lifestyle. Some of the keys to look at when you're looking for a lender Look for a lender that requires no credit check, provides a 0 to low interest loan to the patient, pays the healthcare provider up front, and provides a patient payment plan that is no or low cost to the provider. On the large scale, some health systems have looked at liquidating the entire in-house payment arrangement population. This can free a lot of resources. While this might not make sense for everyone, the strategy can provide a one-time surge in cash. By transitioning the entire legacy payment arrangement population to a third-party finance company, hospitals can get out of the resource burden of managing this population. These resources can then be allocated to more value-added tasks.
All right, we're going to wrap up today with a little bit of discussion around artificial intelligence. Really, artificial intelligence is beginning to transform the revenue cycle, and early adopters have already begun to successfully deploy this in a variety of areas, which I'll talk about next. Where we're seeing AI make an impact today is in the following. One, autonomous clinical coding has the ability to assign medical codes to a patient's EMR based on the diagnosis. So the system literally reads the medical record, and unlike just computer-assisted coding where it might make a recommendation to a coder, it's actually completing the coding based on design rules and doing it with a high level of accuracy. In fact, potentially up to 98% accuracy, more accurate than human coders in many cases. So obviously that eliminates a lot of manual processes. It increases accuracy and lowers total coding operating costs. Voice analytics can analyze collection calls to patients to drive better patient experiences. So the old process would be, you would have a supervisor listen to 10 recorded calls a month for each employee and score them and things like that. Well, guess what? In today's world, we have the technical capability to listen to 100% of the phone calls, and the system itself can determine things like tone of voice, were any inappropriate words or language used on the call. It can really scan for some of the basic but important components of a call that drive patient satisfaction, and alert a supervisor if there are concerns with the call to go in and listen to it or even take over the call, and can provide a call-by-call score that you can aggregate up over the course of a day for an agent on the phone. Automated pre-authorization can automatically determine if an authorization is needed for a service and then actually submit the authorization through a payer's website without any sort of human intervention. Automated claims follow-up that goes beyond just simple claim status, but actually is capable of executing the next workflow action that would get the claim resolved. So the simplest example is, we've been able to go out for years now in an automated fashion via 276, 277 transactions and determine, hey, there's no claim on file. But you still have to drop that into a work queue for somebody to go do something with it. Well, AI is now starting to get to a point where it can go in and see that response from the payer and automatically resubmit the bill from the host patient accounting system without any human intervention at all. Or it could pull medical records and send medical records to the payer. But there are obviously a lot of simple kind of non-clinical type of one-step resolutions that can be done with artificial intelligence. Or it can even start to analyze the reason for the denial and route it to the right technical or clinical person to view it and work the appeal to get the denial overturned. Prediction tools are helping to drive cash pretty significantly. Examples are, as Doug mentioned, propensity to pay, right? Helping to optimize which patients can I basically just send letters to and leave them alone and be pretty confident that they're going to pay, versus which patients should I call and offer discounts to or payment plans. How do I make sure that I'm maximizing my ability to collect from a patient? We can predict the probability that a claim is going to pay or deny the day that you drop the bill. So having that capability and knowing that, hey, bills that went out the door that looked like this previously got denied, here's something you can fix before you even send it out the door to increase your probability of getting it paid, is extremely valuable to organizations, because the cost of rework and the challenge of, even as we talked about, having the staff to do the rework is a real issue. You're better off getting it fixed before it goes out the door and increasing your overall collections. And finally, screening through your uninsured patients to determine presumptive charity is a big opportunity as well. Many hospitals and health systems are sort of leaving some tax benefit opportunity on the table, is how I'll phrase it, by letting accounts go to bad debt that could have been deemed charity under their presumptive charity policies. And so being able to have some automated tools to troll through your uninsured inventory and identify those charity opportunities is critical. So, just going off of some quotes and some statistics that we have seen, the prediction is that back office financial and non-clinical tasks will be the primary application and beneficiary of artificial intelligence in healthcare. With this number you see here, over 97% of the AI changes in healthcare will be in revenue cycle in the back end. So again, looking at the magnitude of this, if you're waiting around to see somebody else using AI, I think we're at a point where you just can't afford to wait anymore, right? The technology is proven. While it hasn't been used in healthcare as much as in some other industries, it's becoming a standard part of our day-to-day interactions at this point. And so, we in healthcare need to begin to embrace this in our revenue cycles and start to drive some of these changes. So that concludes the core portion of our presentation material today. We had a group of folks who submitted some questions that we put together. So Doug and I are gonna kind of field those questions here for you, just to help out and hopefully get some additional wisdom out of this before we wrap up. So first question here that we have, I'll read the question. Doug, I'll let you answer this one, but doesn't outsourcing AR functions such as EBO lead to lower patient satisfaction?
It's really important when you're looking at a vendor to outsource is to select the right business partner that aligns with your health system values. There's some great vendor partners out there in the industry who will take the time to hire the right people and train them appropriately because they understand the importance of patient satisfaction. How you're measuring patient satisfaction today? If you're only using HCAHPS scores, then you're missing the opportunity to really understand the service on the individual phone call. So when you're selecting a vendor, you should only look and work with someone who records 100% of their phone calls, does real-time patient surveys at the end of the calls, and is willing to share that information back with you and commit to treating your patients the way you would want them to be treated. Second question, doesn't outsourcing still create additional work and questions from the vendor to my internal hospital staff?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think it definitely does, right? Especially at the initiation of a new engagement. So as people are learning and kind of getting up to speed on how things are done, I think there is an increase in engagement required by the internal hospital staff at the outset. Now that said, I know many vendors are willing to put people on site to do follow-up work or support work for their engagement, and if that's really a concern, that should be something that a health system or hospital or physician practice asks for right at the outset, right? Is hey, how are you going to support the needs for your own staff? Are you going to rely on my folks, or do you have your own people that you can rely on? And setting that expectation, including that as part of the contractual obligation, can certainly be valuable. All right, our next question here. Isn't it a hassle and expensive having to deal with patient financing companies, especially with monthly recourse?
Yeah, it can be. It's really important to do your homework when looking for a financing business partner and really understand the financial details of each program. Some of the finance companies charge significant fees through funding discounts or high interest rates that make it cheaper for you to work the accounts and offer payment plans. However, in many instances, the reduction in support costs and maintaining ongoing payment arrangements can be significant, which outweigh the program costs. There are low and no cost solutions in the industry today, depending upon your business needs. Additionally, some have low recourse rates as low as 5%, and this can be a great patient satisfier. Next question, isn't charging an interest rate to patients on the balances creating an additional burden to them?
Yeah, Doug, I'd answer that a few different ways, I guess. I don't think it does, right? So I think you're actually giving patients an extra option that you wouldn't have otherwise provided. So certainly I've seen some organizations say, these are our payment plan terms, and if you can't meet them, we're just going to send you to bad debt, right? And then the bad debt agency kind of does the same thing many times. You know, pay this amount monthly, this minimum amount, or else, right? So by offering a financing option, you're really giving the patient the flexibility of determining how much they can afford to pay, how long they want to take to pay it. And although those are sometimes interest bearing, you know, there's a couple of points I'd make there. One is many times patients will set up a payment arrangement to meet your minimum terms and then charge it to their credit card. And these are sometimes folks who don't pay off their credit card monthly. So they're paying interest on it anyway. And many times their kind of commercial, Visa, MasterCard, whatever, has much higher interest rates than what the healthcare only specific credit card rates will be. So being able to offer a low interest rate program can actually reduce the cost of the person carrying that medical debt or paying off that medical debt. The other thing that we've seen too is patients are more likely to pay when they take ownership of it. Meaning if they have a loan through a bank that they've now taken and they've selected the terms, meaning they've agreed to pay whatever it is, $25, $50, $100 a month, they're much more likely to complete that and pay it in full than if there's really no sort of obligation other than, oh, I missed my payment to the hospital this month, oh well, right? When it's a bank that's backing that, it takes a additional level of seriousness into the whole payment process. All right, our next question. If my health system only has the ability to target one area for optimal vendor impact after COVID-19, what would you recommend?
Yeah, well, the majority of your cash collected for a health system is going to come from the commercial or government payers. So ensuring that your patient accounting operation is reviewing all accounts at least every 30 days, like we had mentioned earlier, is going to maximize your ability to collect. If you can't meet that threshold, it might be time to bring in a vendor partner to supplement your internal team, such as working the lower balances while your internal team focuses on the higher balances. The low balance accounts are typically the ones that get left out, but they are equally as important as your higher balance accounts because a lot of them will pay with just a little bit of effort, but obviously you've got to touch them on a regular basis in order to prod those payers to pay consistently. Next question. What is one key metric that may be more important post-COVID that was not necessarily as important pre-COVID?
Yeah, so I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I'm going to build on your last answer, Doug, here and say, you know, back to what I discussed, measuring the frequency with which your AR is getting worked, right? So how many times are you working your AR every 30 days versus not? So the reason I think that's more important is that with bringing staff back and maybe having to bring back a lower level of staff than you had before COVID, what you're working and what you're not working becomes extremely important, and being deliberate about that and monitoring it, whether it's, you know, using the analytics that we talked about to make sure you're working the highest value accounts in your AR, or understanding which components of the AR aren't getting worked and trying to determine if there would be a positive ROI to either bring back additional resources or outsource to somebody who could work it. As you saw in the case study earlier, there was a pretty significant material value to that particular hospital and organization to make sure they were getting all of their AR worked. So I think the ability to measure and monitor that and know what's going on so that you can make decisions that are going to drive the highest cash and revenue for your organization is what is going to be critical. All right, our next and last question here. Does AI really work? And if it does, how quickly will it reduce cost in my organization?
Yeah, as you had mentioned previously, Jeff, at the present moment, we aren't seeing anything in the market that is purely plug and play. By definition, AI learns over time, like a child growing to adulthood, but maybe at a much faster pace. We have seen AI be able to produce results that compound over the course of several months. We don't necessarily see AI produce instant results because every health system has slightly different version of services provided, the technology that they use, and different payer mixes and different contracts. The differences that I just outlined lead to the need for focused, custom-built AI solutions, and it's not something that you can just pull off the shelf and plug in.
All right, we want to thank everyone for listening today. Appreciate the time that you took to let us share with you some of our tips and best practices. If there's more information that you'd like to get, feel free to reach out and contact us or check out our website at meduetrcm.com. Thank you and have a great day and best wishes in the post-COVID operating environment.